viewers. My name's Gabby.
My name's Naaman.
And my name is Terry.
Welcome to this edition of Naaman News. Today we're showing a video of Mr. Hampton and some of his friends.
We got Officer Guthrie, Coach Saber, and Coach Bland. And
They're talking about some Super Bowl predictions and whether they were right or wrong.
Sports Talk with Mr. Hampton. Today we got several of the same guests coming back. We got Coach Bland, Coach Setberry, Mr. Ragland, Officer Guthrie, and we have Student Representative Ryan Hampton. And no, we are not related. First, I want to give a shout out and congratulations to the girls basketball team, which by beating Lakeview last night finished second in the district, and they're on the way to the playoffs. Should find out. We're going to play Berkner most likely. We should find out when here really soon. Game next week. Now let's recap the big events that happened on Sunday afternoon and evening. The Super Bowl. As we talk about the Super Bowl, most of us watched it unless we stopped watching it right after halftime when Atlanta was blowing New England out. And if you did stop watching it, you missed one heck of a finish to a football game. But my question for today, topic of discussion will be, was the end result an epic failure by the Atlanta Falcons not being able to close them out, or an epic comeback by the New England Patriots for coming back and winning that game?
I would love to start. I think it was sort of hard to determine this, but ultimately it came down to an epic failure on the part of the Falcons. And we can all appreciate that the Patriots took advantage of the opportunities that they had, but those opportunities were only afforded to them by the bad play calling and decision making of the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones gets the ball down at the 22, 23-yard line. If they simply run the football, kick a field goal, it closes the game out. They chose not to do that, and it gave them, the Patriots, another opportunity to come back and take that game from them.
I couldn't agree more. Looking at the play calling, obviously run the football, but if you're going to throw the ball, it needs to be a quick screen. It needs to be a quick game, 3-step drop. Last thing you can do is take a 5-step, 7-step drop and take a sack, because that's the one thing that's going to put you out of field goal range, which really closes out the game. So I think they opened up the door for the Patriots, and that's all the Patriots really need, being a great team that they are, having Tom Brady. They opened up the door for them, and I lean more towards the epic failure of the Falcons.
I'm going to have to actually say the opposite and say it was an epic comeback. Mainly because, of Tom Brady. I mean, and what the Patriots do. I think when you really look at the whole big picture of the thing, everybody thought at halftime it was over. I saw something where they were talking about Atlanta Falcons jerseys were flying off the shelves at halftime. But I think it was a life lesson for everybody. That's, what sports teaches us all, is that you're never out until the final whistle goes off. And I think they taught us that. And they just kept digging in, kept digging in. Even if it was a 21-point game, I kept saying, man, the Patriots aren't done. The Patriots aren't done. I was like, they could possibly still do it. And the next thing you know, they got a break here, a break there, and all of a sudden we're all sitting on the edge of our seat like, oh my gosh, here we go. And it happened.
I have to agree. I'd say comeback for the Patriots. I don't know if anybody else besides Brady and Belichick could come back from 25 points down. The last time we saw a Super Bowl like this, it was Seahawks and Broncos, and Peyton Manning was not able to come back, obviously. That was 43-8. And I don't think anybody, another quarterback, could be able to come back like Brady did that game. And obviously Atlanta, they did have the bad play calls. They should have run it on the possession when they had it down after Julio Jones caught it. But Brady still had to make the plays, and he did. And I was watching the game. It wasn't, the Falcons are choking. It was Patriots are coming back. And that's how I think that.
So I think I agree with you two, because while there was bad play calling, bad decision making by the quarterback, taking a sack, we took a sack, all that kind of thing, you still have to be able to perform. And not counting yourself out and not getting down on yourself and having that team spirit. They've been there before, done that, and they just chipped away and chipped away. I mean, they had to score 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions to even tie it up. And to be able to do that, the amazing catch by Edelman, that was crazy. But if you look back at the Super Bowls that the Patriots lost, those were close. And those were some freak plays at the end that kind of helped those teams win. So you have to execute. So to me, being able to execute all those plays, scoring the touchdowns and the extra points, I think it was a comeback. I Now, Atlanta did some things to shoot themselves in the foot, but ultimately, as much as I want to hate Tom Brady, it's hard to do that. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever.
I'm going to have to go ahead and say it was an epic failure by the Atlanta Falcons. But there's a lot of things that played into it that people don't probably think about. The first thing is at halftime of the game, although the Falcons were up 21-3, by the time they got back on the field at the end of the third quarter, their offense actually had not been on the field for over an hour. And what that means is New England Patriots defense had not been on the field for over an hour. That means the Atlanta Falcons defense spent a lot of time on the field. And by spending a lot of time on the field, those boys were worn out by the end of the game. But not running the ball, not making the right play calls, not making the right decisions as a team, ultimately cost them the game. And I mean, if you're up 28-3, all you got to do is run out the clock. But if you think about it, right after halftime, the Falcons came out on the field and they had 3 and out right away. And there's this thing called momentum. And once the Patriots grabbed that momentum, they did not let it go, and they ended up winning the football game. Now that we know the end result, and it is debatable whether or not Tom Brady should have been the MVP of that game. He probably shouldn't have been, in my opinion. James White, awesome performance, scoring all those 3 touchdowns, a 2-point conversion, 14 catches, over 100 yards receiving, and he's a running back. Probably should have been MVP of the game. But one of the things we need to discuss is whether or not Tom Brady, with 5 Super Bowl championships, should be considered the greatest quarterback of all time.
You want me to start off on that one? I mean, just by the sheer number of Super Bowl wins and appearances, what was it, 7 in his career and 5 wins? That's a combination of the coaching staff and the front office having the personnel, because he's had different teams every time. But if you look at the players that are around him, you don't see the real big superstars like you do on some teams. It's always the middle of the road kind of guys. And for Tom Brady to be able to sit back there and just throw those passes and run that offense, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in all time.
And see, I agree with the statement he made at the very end. He's not the greatest. He's one of the greatest. What people fail to realize is Tom Brady came out of college. Tom Brady was an average, mediocre quarterback. He didn't do nothing special at Michigan. You look at his combine times and his throws, he didn't have a strong arm. He is a product of a great system. How we know that is, hey, check out the Patriots when they didn't play him for a season, and they put Matt Castle, a scrub out there. He won 11 games because they was playing under a system where you could almost interject any quarterback behind that offensive scheme, and that defense was so good that they can be successful. So is he one of the greatest quarterbacks? Yes. The greatest of all times? No, he's part of the system.
I think when you look at quarterbacks in the NFL, ultimately they're judged by winning. And, you look at some quarterbacks that just had undeniable talent. If I say just from my eyes, some of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen in terms of their ability to throw the football and release, you got Dan Marino and, obviously John Elway that didn't win one until late into his career. Just the ability to play quarterback. But that's so subjective. Ultimately, the easiest way to measure the best is by championships and their ability to win. And that's why Joe Montana ranks high up on the list. But you talk about the system, you could say the same thing about Joe Montana, because using that same system later on, Steve Young kind of took the reins, was able to do similar things, So to me, ultimately, the best way to judge quarterbacks without all the subjectivity and stuff like that is just looking at what they were able to do in terms of racking up championships. And he's won 5, and he's been to 7. So that's something that's never been done before. So I think it's hard to make an argument against him not being the GOAT.
I think if you ask me, I got to go with he's the greatest of all time. And I'm not a Brady fan. I like watching him play because he makes plays. But I know ultimately, this is what we do. This is what I do for a living. And, the quarterback touches the ball every snap so they have an opportunity to make more plays. But the one thing that he's proven year in, year out, over and over and over, is that he makes plays when it counts. I heard you say earlier about, the guys around him aren't that good. But at some point in time, I think we have to say maybe they're better than what we give them credit for. I think it's the Belichick way, the Patriot way of how they select people to be on their team. But it's more, I think they take guys that are unselfish, that are willing to take the team mentality to make it happen. And I think Brady is the alpha male, so to speak. He's the dominant guy on their team, but he makes it go. And if you watched him over the years, you see that passion come out in him. You see the leadership come out in him. But then you also see the playmaking ability come out of him. And, he's slow. We've seen him run the ball, and everybody's like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe Brady did it.
but maybe that's kind of Brady's style. You know, I'm going to make plays when I have to make plays. I'm going to make this career last so I don't run every snap, you know, those kind of things. You know, yeah, 40 times are slow, but at the end of the day, you know, I know guys that can't run out of sight on a 40, but they can still make plays on the football field, and Brady is doing that.
I tell you what makes him unique about what, you know, just hitting on what you just said, though, is that you look at all the guys that racked up championships, you know, the other guys before. Terry Bradshaw obviously had Stallworth and Lynn Swann. You know, Joe Montana had Jerry Rice. You know, everybody else, you had a combo. You could think about the Hall of Fame receiver that they threw to. Who is it? One year he had Moss, but, you know, you can't.
I mean, we're saying Amendola, Edelman, or we saying Gronkowski. I mean, those guys are, we're calling those big time down the field threats. That's not Julio Jones that we just saw him, you know, compete against. I mean, I think you got to hats off to Brady, man. I mean, I'm calling him the GOAT.
I agree. I call him the greatest of all time. Obviously, Brady, I don't think he would be Tom Brady if it wasn't for Bill Belichick, because it is the system, obviously. And it's like, I mean, if Aaron Rodgers was in there, he could have done the same thing. But at the same time, no other quarterback has won 5 Super Bowls and been gone down that way to the Super Bowl 7 times like that.
But that's a contradiction. You just gave him all that credit and then turned right around and said anybody else like Aaron Rodgers could have did it. So it doesn't. As a quarterback, I list him as one of the greatest, but not the greatest because of the very thing you just said. The system, without Belichick in that system, he's a mediocre, average bum coming out of
the system
college.
helps him,
But that's subjective, though.
and it's the same thing too. He doesn't have a big name on his team, and each Super Bowl he's been to and won, it's been a completely different roster. It hasn't been. Most of the quarterbacks, the greatest of all time, they've had consistent rosters.
Yeah, but that
and
defense,
dynasties have been built.
that defense was a monster when they won.
Defenses have been different whenever they had, I forget what Super Bowl it was, but they had one of the best defenses in the league. They do this year too. But it's been a different system every single year. His offensive weapons, he doesn't have much. They aren't big names. He makes them big names.
But I think that's unfair of you to say that, because if you think about in all sports, we talk about system. You can put it in basketball. We talk about Phil Jackson. We say system. And we know he had players, but we still go back to system. You talk about Chip Kelly in Oregon, we're talking about system. We talk about Baylor with Art Browson, we talk about system. At some point in time, you got to give, you know, credit where credit's due. We can't just say just because you're a winner, it's always a system, because everybody has a system. It's whether your system works or not.
Okay, to sum this up, I would personally say that Tom Brady could be considered one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, obviously, but I wouldn't put him up there as the number 1 quarterback of all time. I'm going to choose my quarterback based off, again, and throughout the history of the sport. If I'm starting a football team, if I'm picking a quarterback, I'm going with Peyton Manning, no doubt about it. If you look at Peyton Manning and the way he played, or the teams he had throughout his career, it wasn't until he got with the Broncos that he had anything that resembled any type of a defense. The first few championships that Brady won were because of the defense, not necessarily because of Tom Brady. They had players like Teddy Bruschi, Willie McGinnis, Ty Law, Lawyer Malloy. They were a dominant defensive team coached by a dominant defensive mastermind coach, Bill Belichick. Now the script has flipped now, where Tom Brady is the mastermind, or he's the one getting it done now, but it hasn't always been that way. So again, I personally would go with Peyton Manning. If you watch any of those Indianapolis Colts defenses, besides the one player that was never on the field, Bob Sanders, you probably couldn't name one other player that really played for him.
Trash.
So
what about
I would
Brady's
go with
first
Peyton Manning.
Super Bowl? What about Brady's first Super Bowl? Nobody gives him credit. He wasn't even the starter.
As
And
much
then he
as I-
comes in, and they were over.
As
And
much
then he
as
comes
I-
in, they win the Super Bowl.
As much as I love the Patriots, they got caught cheating. They got caught cheating on that one. I love the Patriots. They got caught cheating on that one, so I really don't even want to talk about them stealing one from the St. Louis Rams.
Right, but to address the question specifically,
Yeah,
the
call
first
cheating.
Super Bowl they won is because they slowed down the greatest show on turf. It wasn't because of Tom
With
Brady.
film.
All right, Name It For It. That's all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back again next week for more Name It For Sports Talk.
What a great video. Thank you, Mr. Hampton.
And happy Black History Month.
All right, that's all we have time for today. My name's Gabby.
My name's Nehemiah. And my name is Tap Ward.
Thanks for watching Neiman News.
News.